All right. Well, I was hoping that we could start out by just talking about, we've heard the phrase, particularly with reference to Dragon Age 3, but sort of the idea of the next generation of RPGs. And I was hoping that you guys could talk a little bit about what that means for Bioware as a whole, and maybe for your projects specifically also.
So for us, we're continuing Dragon Age and Mass Effect games on the next generation platforms, and we're also booting up new IP as well. We've gone back to the clean sheet design and new IP stuff, and so we're really having fun with that. Casey's working on that. In terms of specifics, it's really nice to have the extra horsepower in the machines. They're actually very powerful computationally. That's really cool. And you can do a lot of really neat things there at 1080p and beyond now. And we're just really dipping our toe in that water now, since they haven't even shipped yet. But it's a lot of fun playing with that hardware. On top of that, we're getting access to things like Oculus Rift and 3D virtual helmets. We're getting 4K TVs, we're getting all this other stuff. So it's actually a pretty fun time to have access to all this really amazing hardware and think of what RPGs could be on those new hardware devices.
I mean, I think what we're starting to see with the newer hardware is the beginnings of the setting and the world becoming alive, becoming a living part of the experience. I think up till now, a lot of RPGs have been, the environments have been almost like stage dressing. They've been there to help tell the story, but they weren't interactive. They weren't telling the story on their own. They were just kind of a painting, a backdrop, a piece of set.
Yeah, one thing that I've realized is that you're trying to tell a relatable story, and there are ways that you can do that in other media that just naturally feel real and they feel human. And I think as gamers, we get used to a version of realistic. And so we see things and we say, it looks amazing. But if you show someone who doesn't play games, they might, earlier generations, they would say, you'd be excited about graphics, and they'd say, well, why doesn't that character have a shadow? How come their hair never moves? And so we're moving away from these things. But, I think what we're seeing is that the technology that we're working with now has the ability to actually get past so much of that stuff that you can get into telling a human story that actually requires, just that relatability that, hair can move and the wind is affecting things, and there's just all these things about fabric, and they're features and details and things like that. But it actually allows the technology to get out of the way of the storytelling.
Well, in terms of telling like that relatable kind of story, like each form of media kind of handles different aspects of storytelling well. I mean, what is it that you guys think that games handle well that maybe something like books or movie can't?
I mean, ultimately, it is interactive. It is player interaction. When you're reaching a dilemma point in a storytelling medium like a book, you may agonize over what the character is going to do, but ultimately you have no influence over that. What's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, a movie is going to end the same way, unless it's like Clue from the 80s. Whereas with a game, I mean, that is your choice. That makes that choice that much more powerful.
As we've kind of learned about, what's compelling in an interactive story, one of the principles is that, a player doesn't really engage with something unless they have interacted with it. And that's different from what you'd see in a movie, for example, where you can show that a character, has a pet, and then if something happens to the pet, then you feel empathy for them. But as a player, you only really start to feel empathy for other characters once you've interacted with them and you have a sense of them, because you know that it's an interactive media. But once you have that, and once you've interacted with the character, and you feel like you have a pet and that pet is yours, now there's an emotional connection that's there that you can't get in other media, because you personally have made a decision either to engage with it or to not, and that actually gives you kind of an emotional hook into something that there's a power in this kind of storytelling that you can't get to through other media.
Well, what about in terms of like getting to that idea of the next generation of role playing? We're still coming up to a period where there's going to be cross-platform releases. Like Dragon Age 3, for instance, is coming out on like current gen and next gen consoles. How does that make it difficult to sort of make that full leap to what a next gen RPG should be?
I think with Dragon Age, we're pushing all 5 platforms as far as we can, just right to the edge of their breaking point, and you'll start to see some next generation stuff emerge. But I think we'll just be the start of it. And I think as we move deeper into the generation, Mass Effect and games beyond it we'll be able to do more and more with it.
Yeah, you see that happen every time new hardware comes out, right? The stuff at the early thing is pushing boundaries and it just keeps happening, keeps happening, keeps happening. So we're very much on that path as well.
Yeah, one of the realities too is that, I mean, it takes a tremendous effort to build all this stuff. And, you know, there are things that we're seeing in Dragon Age in terms of what you can do as a character moving around the environment, and this incredible level of interactivity just through moving. But to build that technology is so expensive, so difficult that, you know, once you have that, then you can start building on it, and then other games can take on other challenges. And that's why over the course of a generation, and especially with this generation, you know, we're finding the fact that we're working on Frostbite, we're all kind of sharing technology and building something really special together. We're able to kind of take on the fact that this stuff is so much harder than ever before, but we're working more efficiently so that, you know, we can build on what each game is developing.
Yeah, I know the stat that we often hear around EA is that there's over 1,000 developers on Frostbite right now. And as that stat gets circulated around more and more, you realize that they're not working all that many games in the grand scheme of things. And so you realize that if they're building on each other, they're sharing, they're interacting together and working on these big hard problems, to Casey's point, you realize how much that we can unlock over time and make possible.
You'd mentioned sort of a clean slate earlier, like a new generation being a chance to introduce some new IP. Like, can you talk about the importance of new IP as it relates to like the release of a new console cycle too?
Yeah, I think new IP is the lifeblood of the whole industry. Innovation is also something that is pretty unique to games. People expect to be blown away, not just by new ideas and new stories and characters, but by things that they've never experienced before. So technology has to keep going. And IP is a new reason to do that. When you rewind to when we started Mass Effect, we were actually kind of at the end of the original Xbox cycle. And we had shipped Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And then we were looking ahead to what you could do in that console cycle. Now that we're kind of looking ahead to another transition, we're in a similar position and we're trying to imagine what you would do there. But the fact that we have this transition allows us to kind of design things from the ground up again. And so the next Mass Effect game, we can start from the ground up in terms of what you could do with that IP, given that you have new technologies, new way of controlling the games. And then likewise with our new IP, it's just taking all the stuff that you can do now and designing the IP that's going to naturally capture all of that stuff.
Do you have a favorite phase of this in terms of like, you know, like Mass Effect 3, you have 2 games behind you, a lot of experience, a lot of like assets and the sort of process down. So it must be fun to refine that, but at the same time, it must also be kind of fun to start fresh too, right?
Yeah, each of the phases has its own benefits. So it's definitely really fun to be at the beginning and, you know, everything is clean slate. But in some ways it's the hardest because it can be anything, and it's very risky. You're trying to figure out the best way to go. And then as you go on, there's benefits in being able to know exactly what your IP is, know exactly what people like about it. Listening to fans, that's one of the things that gives us a really good compass on what people like about it. When we launch a game, even, you know, whether it's Mass Effect 3 or 1, it's still our guess at what people are going to like. Mm-hmm. But as time goes on, you know, we get more and more informed about the characters people want to see more of, what the game means to them, and those things.
Yeah, the funny thing I think about is that you're right, every phase has its own benefits and pros and cons, and it's never easy. It's never easy. I always think to myself, okay, now it's going to be smooth sailing, we know what we're doing. I think, no, you always learn things. Everybody around here has a great appetite for pushing things, so it's always this desire to, whenever things get easy, people don't like being comfortable. They want to push hard and try new things and push. That's where Mass Effect 3 multiplayer came from, for example. It was an idea around, we haven't done this in a while, maybe we could do this, and it would have been, obviously, in some ways easier to make Mass Effect 3 without that, but no, people are excited to try it out, they want to push that way, and so we try to help people do that. And again, everything that should be easy, we make harder for ourselves, and ultimately, hopefully, it all pays off in the end where people enjoy what they did. And fans love it too. But I've learned in my 13 years, it's never easy. I've yet to see it get easy, no matter what phase you're in.
You can't be comfortable. I mean, if you're comfortable, you're ultimately complacent. And
Yeah.
I think you need to be pushing the boundaries all the time.
Yeah. Well, look at Dragon Age. You had 2 games under your belt on the same engine, and you guys decided to change engines, and for the better. And so again, as soon as we get this place, we'd be like, yeah, now we've learned a lot. You can take that and synthesize something that's a good plan for the next game. Let's actually change engines and do something really cool like that. And again, it's always better for it. We've been lucky that way, but we don't like making things easy for ourselves.
Can you give us any sort of update as to where things are on the new IP, or is that still totally hush hush right now?
I think it's still totally hush hush.
Yeah, I mean, we could say that we're in early stages of exploring what we want to do, and when you look at the new opportunities and then compare that against creative ideas, things that the team wants to do, we're kind of comparing those goals and those opportunities right now and starting to explore specific creative ideas, but we're just not ready to share specific ones yet.
Fair enough. Well, so obviously Bioware, well known for role-playing games, but one of the interesting things about that terminology is that it's sort of bleeding into all other kinds of genres and stuff all over the place.
Absolutely.
I mean, in your guys' opinion, what is an RPG? Is there a definite, how do you go about defining that these days?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing, because I remember in, 1997 when I started at Bioware, when there was a lot of argument at the time over whether or not Diablo was an RPG. And I think the general consensus at the time was that it was not. And by
an action game or something.
It was an action game or something. And by today's standards, it's absolutely an RPG.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I think these sort of terms are always evolving and always changing. Because I mean, when I look at something like Grand Theft Auto, it's got all the you make a checklist of what's in an RPG. It checks all the checkboxes. It's got stats to upgrade. You essentially level up, and there's a story that it's telling, and you do things, and you have combat, and so it's like, is Grand Theft Auto an RPG? It doesn't say that it's an RPG, but you definitely are playing a role. So it definitely is a role-playing game.
Mark's absolutely right. These definitions evolve over time, and one of our jobs is to keep watching that evolve and keep trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, and then putting our own spin on those things and trying to interject what we think is an important place and direction to take these things.
Is it even possible for a game that is let's say adheres to a more strict definition of RPG? Is there a place for that in the landscape today?
Oh sure, I think you've never seen a time where there's more opportunity to have a diverse set of games out there in the world. Whether you're an an indie game developer, whether you're kickstarting something, whether you're a small studio, a large studio. It's an amazing time to be a game developer, because chances are you've never had a better chance than to get your game built and put your blood, sweat, and tears into it and put it out there for fans to hopefully enjoy. It's an amazing time for that. I remember, just to reminisce like Mark was, there was a time when we thought people would say, oh, the days of independent development are dead because you need a big publisher to back you and stuff. Oh, absolutely not. No. That's one way to do it, and that's a way I enjoy working. But there's absolutely many ways to get a game developed now, and it's great. It's a good time to be in the industry. Do
you guys ever go back and you obviously have people on staff who have been here as far back as Baldur's Gate. Do you ever go back and replay those and sort of to try and get back to your roots in any sense, or see if there are any ideas that have sort of been sort of need dusting off from the past? Does that happen? Yeah.
Well, I know when KOTOR just came out on the iPad.
Yeah, great example.
That was my most recent experience with that. Playing some of our older games and other older games was part of sort of my re-education in thinking about games and then starting to design a new IP. But playing KOTOR on the iPad, it's in some ways it's incredible how far we've come. And then in other ways, you remember these little bits of magic that you're trying to put in, and they're in there. And it's great to go back and see, maybe in a more rudimentary form in some ways, but see these little pieces of magic that still work and that are still applicable, even though you go multiple generations ahead into what we can do next. But there will be new ways that we can capture that kind of magic. And so it's definitely something that we go back to and try and think about what we used to try to do.
Yeah, it's funny because my two sons are in the studio today, and my 7-year-old's playing KOTOR on the iPad. My 10-year-old played it too, and now my 7-year-old's playing it. And to watch him tap with it and play with it it's mind-bending to me, because I worked in that game 10 years ago, and here's my 7-year-old son, born well after the game out, now playing it and everything. Take Baldur's Gate as another example. One of the things I love about Baldur's Gate is the expansiveness and the richness of the world. That is definitely something we've looked at with Dragon Age and said, let's get back to it. Let's do more of that. Let's have big, broad, epic stories that take you to many places. That's something we did 15 years ago and can definitely do again.
there are certain elements of role-playing games, like say, like the conversation system in Bioware games, or even things like exploring like an open world idea. Where do you see the future of those things going? Is there a time when like we'll just be able to talk at our television and it will understand and be able to interpret what we're asking people? Like,
theoretically, yeah. I mean, we did that with Kinect and Mass Effect 3. The first start of voice recognition and things, and the more you look at the hardware that's coming out now, the more I think you'd have a hard time not believing everything is possible. Just give it time and see where it ends up, because there's so many smart people working on amazing things right now. You can't help but believe that maybe it's 5, 10 years from now, maybe it's 20 years from now, who knows? But I could have never guessed that KOTOR would be on a touchscreen tablet you carried around one day when we finished shipping it 10 years ago. And yet, sure enough, there it is. So who knows what's going to come in the future. I think everything's possible at this point.
People are hard. Like, I think what you'll see first is you'll see like true 3D and omnidirectional treadmills and things like that, letting you explore environments and interact with spaces more and more and more realistically. But people are hard, and we've seen this time and time again where we've been at the crux of human-computer interaction, and it's always a little bit further away. And I think we'll get there, but I don't think that is imminent. I think a lot of other things are very, very close. Like I think Oculus Rift is showing that there is an appetite for 3D that actually I think the last 10 years it sort of seemed to have disproven. Is suddenly it's just resurging, and there's just suddenly this big interest in it again.
Yeah, our goal with all of this stuff is to try and reevaluate what we've done previously, and then think about where are the barriers that we can remove from that, and just let the game get out of the way and let you be immersed in the experience. And I mean, that was one of the things about getting to the conversation wheel in the first place. Was I remember Jade Empire had made a lot of improvements to what we did on KOTOR in terms of better conversation, and it just kind of felt a lot more fluid. And then even there, though, I read reviews that said, Bioware games being wordy and things like that. And I thought, well, so what can we do to make it that much better? And then we got to the conversation wheel. But the other thing is that the things that we've just shipped don't necessarily represent our most current thinking, because that conversation wheel was something that we came up with back in 2004 or 5. Yeah. And then we continued to try and evolve it and stay with it as part of what that experience was about. But we've been thinking all of that time about how we can do it better. And so these new IPs and new technologies are an opportunity for us to design something that's meant for a better way to talk to characters and a better way to just be in an environment.
There's sort of an emphasis, there are a few games this year in particular, like BioShock Infinite and The Last of Us, that really sort of put a strong relationship between two characters kind of at the forefront. And that doesn't use dialogue, but like that sort of, or dialogue choices. That just sort of gets me thinking about what the next phase of technology can sort of help to facilitate that kind of relationship building also.
Yeah, again, with the fidelity we can achieve now, with the amount of content we can push into next generation stuff. That's the other thing too, with how powerful the hardware is, it becomes, to go back to the theme of letting the hardware get out of the way, it becomes less and less a concern for the developer to make it go, and more what possibly could we do in this space. And so perhaps it's character interactions, NPC interactions that could become a next great thing. I know we spend a lot of time thinking about that with our party members in our games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. So that can be something that I think as we're exploring the boundaries of new hardware, we're feeling like, look at how much content we can push in here now. Look at how much more interactive we can make it. Casey talked about the interactivity that's coming out in Dragon Age. Absolutely, that's going to feed right into character interactions and the level of fidelity we're going to show in party members' faces and things like that. It's going to be really cool.
We're definitely seeing more and more nonverbal interaction.
Oh yeah,
so
good point.
Gesture, facial animation, things that say something without actually saying any words. That's becoming, we're just at the edges of that now, I think.
If you look at BioWare today, I think the perception is, like a a studio known for role-playing games, supported by a few key pillars right now, like Dragon Age and Mass Effect. Where do you see that perception evolving in, say, like the next 5 years? Where is Bioware then?
Well, I hope people still see us being true to our roots and still see us delivering great story and great characters and beautiful environments to interact with and feel like you belong in and feel like you want to explore and do things, and even as you progress through them and be amazed by what you see, have fun with combat, have fun with interactions with these characters. So I hope people still see us as that. But I think RPGs are perfect for the next generation of hardware. I think I can't think of a genre that has so much more opportunity than RPGs do for the next. So I think we're just beginning to see the limits of that right now, and it's going to be really fun to push ourselves through that. Over the course of the next 5 years, that's a long time. It's a very long time. We can do a lot in 5 years.
What are your attitudes towards these sort of dormant franchises right now, like
Jade Empire?
Jade Empire, or Knights of the Old Republic also specifically, rather than just Tor.
Do you want to handle the Jade Empire one?
Yeah, so I was the lead programmer on Jade Empire. My lead designer was the lead writer on Jade Empire. I have a lot of nostalgia and fondness for the franchise. It's something that I would certainly think that we will revisit at some point in the future. There is a lot of delicacy, I think, that's required with Jade, just because of its setting and because of its subject matter, but I would like to go back to it at some point.
Yeah, if we did, I think Mark's right. If we did go back to Jade Empire, I think we'd do it again with sort of a clean sheet design, and we'd say, why does it even belong on a console, for example? Maybe it's something that would go to a tablet. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but we would. I think we would. That IP deserves to be given that treatment to say, let's just think about it from the basics and decide what to do. But we don't have any specifics. We're really busy with everything else right now. We don't have anything to do right now. In terms of Star Wars, Case and I do talk about Star Wars a fair bit now that EA has got the Star Wars license. We're not committed to do any Star Wars games from this studio yet, even though the Austin stuff's happening and doing very well with SWTOR. Right. So you have any thoughts on Star Wars, Casey?
Well, as a fan of games and having really enjoyed working on some of the games we've worked on previously, I wish I could work on more games at once.
Yes.
So if it was possible for us to do more, then those are some of the things that we would want to do. For me right now, I'm overseeing the next Mass Effect game. We have a ton of work developing our new IP. I wish there was room and people to do more, but certainly we enjoyed working on KOTOR.
Oh yeah.
And it'd be fun to go back if we could.
And your studio also has a very vocal fan base. Lots of very dedicated people out there. And to the point that you guys actually go and look and see what they have to say. Can you talk about incorporating fan feedback into your approach? Whether it's there's the Mass Effect 3 ending. There's changes from Dragon Age 2 to Inquisition, things like that.
Well, I think any good organization listens to its customers and wants to do that. So first and foremost, I think that's just a smart way to do things. Secondly, on top of that, as players ourselves, we're all very passionate about what people have to say about the stuff we create and put out there. And so we enjoy actually going through and reading all that. And a lot of times our fans have great suggestions and great things that provide insight and provide input that makes itself into future games. For Dragon Age, for example, one of the reasons to go to Frostbite came from how we interpret a lot of our fans' feedback, which was, there's more they want to do in this world, and the technology we had at the time, our own homegrown Eclipse engine, wasn't capable of being pushed in that direction, not without significant effort and too long a development time. So going to Frostbite, even as we've put a lot of effort and development to that, to build it into an RPG engine, that helped, that player feedback helped us come to that decision to say, it's time to get a new engine. We're going to have to bite that bullet to go that way and do that. And I think, again, the results are very positive, and we're very happy we did that. So that kind of stuff really helps us do that kind of thing.
Yeah, the way I always think about it is, if you're a musician or an actor, you often have an opportunity to play to an audience, and there's a relationship there where you can kind of see what's working. A comedian could go to a nightclub and kind of try material and things like that. But we will work for years on a game, and then we don't know. We can do certain kinds of tests and stuff, but we don't really know how a huge community of people will receive it. And so when we get to go to, like Comic-Con and PAX and things like that, and actually talk with people, any opportunity to actually talk with people who play our games, that's the closest we get to having an audience, in a sense, because people will tell us stories about how they experienced our games, whether it's a critical thing or whether it's, these amazing stories about what it meant to them at a certain point in their life and things like that. That's, I think, what we carry back with us in terms of how we should design our next game and the kinds of experiences we're trying to capture for them.
One thing I know, hearing Casey talk made me think of this, is one thing I want to do more of with the studio and with the teams is to get them out to cons during development. I think it's a nice initiative. I think something we haven't done enough of. We've been a little too quiet during development and done things a little too officially. I think we've learned a lot now that our developers love to meet fans and love to be at panels and to share what they're thinking and stuff. It's great to be face-to-face with people and to talk to them and to hear things about whether stuff we've introduced at the panel or stuff that goes back even 10, 15 years. So I really want to do a lot more of that. That's why we're at PAX Australia, for example, because we have some people going down just to spend some time with fans down in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's going to be really cool because they'll inevitably learn or hear something or think about something a bit differently and then come back and share that with the dev team, and it'll probably influence the game in some way.
Yeah, is there a danger to that too, though, in the sense that, like, without having the sort of context or the circumspect of the whole project to sort of decide that something is a bad choice before really knowing about it?
Sure, but that's why it becomes data or input to the whole process of things, and it's something, it's rarely steered us wrong, I can say that, so there's an opportunity to put more of that into the system.
Yeah, you learn things that it's not really about saying, okay, are we going to do story A or story B?
Yeah.
Do you like villain A or villain B? Mm-hmm. It's not really that. It's more about getting a sense of values, having a dialogue, and just getting a sense of what people, how people react to certain kinds of things. And just the simplest example is like when you watch people actually play a game or listen to how they talk about something, they will notice things or have ideas that you would have never realized, because it's just, you have a different perspective. When you are making something, you don't really know what it's like to see that for the first time, and it's a whole different set of reactions. And so it is more data for us to think about, navigating towards something that is going to be really entertaining for people, but also is going to be surprising. It has to be surprising, and it has to delight them in ways that they weren't expecting. And hopefully, that's where we can find this balance through a dialogue with fans.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is about gathering data. I mean, Henry Ford said if you asked people, they would have said they wanted a faster horse, which you could say is dismissive of feedback to the fans, but actually it's not, because ultimately that is data. Like, they wanted something faster. This is telling you what they actually want, even if they don't necessarily completely understand the parameters of what they could possibly have.
Yeah, and then we do our best to interpret that. And again, like I said, I've yet to have people who I talk to who've been to cons or fan events or stuff even locally here come back and not have felt like they learned something or felt they've gained perspective based on talking to that. So it's really good. It's something we can do a lot more of, and I think we will do a lot more of. Well,
lastly, I guess I wanted to give you guys the chance, is there anything you want to say directly to the fans about, what to expect, what to look forward to from Bioware in the next, foreseeable future?
Thanks for being fans. We do a lot of things around here that we do our best to make sure you're happy and make sure you're loving what we're doing. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. These guys have seen some of it now, and you're going to see some in the magazine. But I really hope you're excited for what's coming, because there's a ton of great stuff coming. I think that went pretty well.
Yeah.